I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning. Welcome to our Thursday morning meeting of the Board of County Commissioners, Thursday, January 18th. My name is Andy Hunthausen. My left, Commissioner Tom Rolfe.
Good morning, Mr. Chair.
His left, we have Flo Liston. Flo, thank you for taking care of us today. And we have Greg McNally, our Director of Planning and Community Development. Am I right, Commissioner Candace Payne? Good morning.
Good morning.
Our Deputy County Attorneys, Nico Hash and Keegan Shea, and also Roger Baltz, our Chief Administrative Officer. There's a sign-up sheet in the front. For those who haven't signed in, please do so. And we will start with consent action items, and I'll turn that over to Mr. Baltz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Item 2A on your agenda today for your consideration. It is vendor claims report for the week ending January 19, 2024, and staff recommends approval of that item. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions for staff? Any public comment on this item? Any public comment? Hearing none, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve consent action item number 2A as presented by Marnie Bentley and Roger.
Second, Mr. Chair.
Move to second to approve consent action item as presented. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. All right, on to the next item, which is item number 3 on the agenda, bid award for the Marysville Road chip fog paint project. Good morning, sir.
Mr. Chairman Hunthausen, good morning to you. Commissioner Rolfe, good morning to you as well, sir.
Good morning.
And good morning, Commissioner Payne.
Good morning.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, my name is Kevin Horn. Spelling on that is first name Kevin, K-E-V-I-N. Last name is Horn, H-O-R-N-E. I'm the operations manager for Lewis and Clark County's Public Works Department. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, item 3 on the agenda today is entitled Bid Award for the Marysville Road Chip, Fog, and Paint Award. On January 4th, 3 bids were opened for the Marysville Chip, Fog, Paint project. The project generally consists of chip seal surfacing, fog seal, and paint striping of Marysville Road from Highway 279 to the Great Divide Ski Hill. Funding for this project comes from American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, acronym ARPA, grant award. The work will be completed before June 30th of 2024. After review of all the bids by the selection committee, staff recommends awarding the contract to the low bidder, Bullock Contracting LLC of Boulder, Montana, for the total contract amount of $452,340.84. $452,340.84. We authorize the chair to sign all applicable documents. And Mr. Chairman, with your permission, if I may, I think maybe a little history of how we got to this point with Marysville Road is important for the board and maybe for the general public.
You bet. Thank you.
So the Old Forest Highway program was the first grant that we acquired. That happened in 2008. That constructed the lower end of Marysville from Highway 279 to the town of Marysville. That project was about almost $9 million for that initial improvement. The Forest Highway program didn't have any match requirements, so county didn't have to put in any dollars in those days. That program since got moved to the Federal Land Access Program grant, acronym FLAP, that does require a 13.42% match, which comes from county funds. So the second phase of Marysville was constructed in 2015 and 2016. That project was about $2.5 million. So the investment for the Marysville infrastructure from 279 to the ski hill was pushing $11,560,000, a substantial amount of money over the years since 2008. Under the agreement with Western Federal Lands, the county is required to maintain that improvement going forward. Why I mention that is federal land access program grants we used to be able to put in for surface preservation treatments of these improvements. Over the past couple of years, they've elected to move more towards funding the construction projects and not as much the surface preservation projects. Although we try to go for grant opportunities, the funding's just not there for that. So I'd like to just maybe thank the board. I know Director McCauley, our grants person, is here. Jesse Whitford's also in the room with us today. He's our construction manager that provides all the oversight, estimates, bid documents, and stuff for these projects. And without allocating this money, we would be kind of wondering how we would keep maintaining these improvements. So staff wanted to thank all parties for that. We appreciate you guys taking a look at our application for the ARPA grant and also directing that funds towards the road department for those improvements. This cycle will get us probably the next 7 to 10 years for the preservation of this road. And it was really interesting that just a short tidbit that I might add. We do a lot of work with Great Divide Ski Hill with Travis Crawford up there. Over the weekend, he told me that last year they had 70,000 visitors to the ski hill. So the amount of traffic, the average daily traffic on that when the ski hill is open is at an all-time high. And what we do when the ski hill is open is we dedicate a plow to that ski hill. There's buses that run on Wednesdays and Thursdays and sometimes Fridays that take all of our kiddos from the schools up for ski days. And it's a very important road in our corridor. So thank you for directing the funds toward us. We really appreciate everybody that worked on it.
Thank you, Mr. Horn, for the explanation, history there. Questions, comments, commissioners? Mr. Rolfe.
Just a matter of curiosity, it looks like this came in about a third less than we had estimated. Is there a portion of the project that was that accounted for more of that than another, or is it just through the whole project?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Wolf, great question. Our financial people are the ones that work on that. What I can tell you is it's based off estimates that we provide. That is not in place quantities. So depending on what time of the year we're doing things, if it's a little bit cooler out or a little bit hotter, we might have to decrease oil, chip capacities, things of that nature. So I don't know the exact number that was put in for. I apologize. I could get that for you after the fact, but keep in mind that's based on estimated quantities, not in place quantities.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. All right. How about public comment on this item? Public comment. Public comment. All right. Hearing none. Commissioners, is there a motion, please?
Mr. Chair, I would move to award the bid for the Marysville Road chip fog paint project as to Bullock Construction for $452,340.84, as explained by Mr. Horn.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the bid award as presented. Further discussion, commissioners? I just want to say thank you. You mentioned Jess and Ann and the rest of the team that helps evaluate these things and work on these projects. And then you mentioned also just the flat program in general and what was the forest access program in the past. And we've really made the most out of it, I think. And I'm really happy that we do. We've gone after these projects and dollars. And ultimately, the way you described that, the first 9 million, we didn't have to match. The second 2.5 million, we did have to match. So 13.42% of 2.5 million, we got this entire road done. And that's great. So in this case, we have an opportunity to use ARPA dollars to fund the preservation, and hopefully in 10 years we'll be successful in securing some dollars through the program to do the next preservation piece or whatever needs to be done. But it is a very important road, and I'm glad that we're able to make this happen this year. So thanks for your explanation.
Andy?
Commissioner,
I just want to comment that to some people, I think the ski hill seems like, well, isn't that nice? Why can't we? But I want to get there's a lot of economic benefit to keeping that ski hill running, and that impacts all of us, not just the people who ski or the people who run the ski hill. This helps all of us. They employ people, they pay taxes, they buy products. And so I really appreciate all the effort that's gone into getting this FLAP grant and finding a real good use for it. Thank you.
thank you, Commissioner. Anything else?
I think this really fits in what my hope was for this special money that came in through the ARPA fund to take care of some things that weren't going to create extra expenses for us down the road. Obviously, we have to keep track of have to keep maintaining this road. That's part of the agreement. So it's really a one-time item and doesn't create, but it actually takes care of some expenses that we would have had to do otherwise. So thanks to the Public Works Department for putting this together, and to the grants and funding department for seizing this opportunity to use it this extra money appropriately.
Thank you, Commissioner. All right, with that, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Thank you very much. All right, on to the next item, which is a memorandum of understanding between Lewis and Clark County and the city of Helena. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Ann McCauley, Director of Grants and Purchasing. Before you today is a memorandum of understanding between Lewis and Clark County and the city of Helena to establish a local governance committee for the Lewis and Clark Metro Opioid Abatement Region. There's a lot of words there. Little history on what this is and how it's going to function. The Montana Opioid Abatement Trust was established as part of a multi-state settlement with pharmaceutical companies related to the opioid epidemic. The trust is tasked with managing the funds that are received through the settlement and using them to support opioid remediation efforts in Montana. So we've been up in front of you a couple times over the last 24 months with respect to this opioid settlements. And there's two pools of funding. We're getting some direct dollars from the National Opioid Settlement. Those are coming directly to Lewis and Clark County from that settlement. And then the bulk of the money that's coming to Montana is coming into this abatement trust. The trust is expected to receive over $75 million in funding over the next 18 years as part of that multi-state settlement. The distribution of the trust funds, again, these are the funds that are coming through Montana through the trust to local governments and local communities, will take place through abatement regions that were mapped out in the original MOU. This is Exhibit A of the MOU. Lewis and Clark County and the city of Helena make up the Lewis and Clark Metro Abatement Region. So we are our own region, our county boundaries, and they base those metro regions on populations of 30,000 people or more is what makes up those metro regions. To apply for trust funding, the eligible local governments within each abatement region are required to establish a local governance committee that will do the initial review and ranking of applications submitted within that abatement region. Upon review, the local governments committee will make funding recommendations to the State Trust Advisory Committee for final review and funding approval. So again, this is at our local regional level. A committee will do the initial review of applications that are just from Lewis and Clark Metro region, and then make recommendations for funding to the state advisory that's made up of representatives across the state. Our proposed MOU establishes a 5-member local governance committee made up of an elected representative of Lewis and Clark County's governing body, so our Board of County Commissioners, an elected representative of City of Helena's governing body, so their city commission or mayor, an elected representative of City of East Helena's governing body, a community member that resides in Lewis and Clark County appointed by the Lewis and Clark County Board of County Commissioners, and a community member that resides in the City of Helena appointed by the City of Helena's mayor. The appointment of those 2 community members will follow our respective established processes for board member appointments. This MOU has an effective term of 3 years or as permitted by renewal of the opioid trust funding that's available to Lewis and Clark Metro Region. Staff recommendation is to approve and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions, commissioners? Commissioner Ralph?
Yes, now if it would appear that this group that we're setting up has quite a bit of autonomy on how to make the recommendation to the state organization on this funding. How does the communication set up between our county and this group, other than can the county government make some recommendations, or is it initiated by the local group, by this group that we're setting up here today?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Rolfe, good question. Once this body is established, this local governance structure, that will be that committee that makes those recommendations and reviews those applications. Lewis and Clark County will be an eligible applicant for projects that are submitted from our metro region, as well as the other cities. Nonprofits are eligible, hospitals, school districts are also eligible applicants for this funding. As having a representative from this body on this committee, I think that would be your voice in those recommendations.
So you have a representative here and plus a person from the county that lives in the county that's not an elected official.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Commissioner, that's how it's laid out right now.
Okay. All right. And what is, if I might just follow up?
Yep. Please.
What's the estimated dollars that we're talking about? I think it was estimated, what was it, 70 to 90 million dollars total for the state?
Yes, Mr. Chair, over the next 18 years, it's estimated to be about $75 million coming to the state of Montana. And then Lewis and Clark County's estimate of that over the next 18 years is around $5 million. I believe right now we have about $600,000 available to our region for funding that's come into the trust so far. The trust funds are going to keep coming in every year. And as more settlements are settled, there will be additional funding, but that's kind of an unknown right now of how much more money that's going to be for the state.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question.
Please, Commissioner.
You listed the members of our local governance committee, and I'm just trying to make sure this is, so the local governance committee comes up with an idea as to how money should be spent. And then it goes to the state trust advisory committee. Who are the members of the state trust advisory committee, and how are they chosen?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Payne, those members of the State Advisory Committee were chosen last spring. And if I recall, the three of those members are made up of representatives that were nominated by the 7 or 8 metro regions. And so it was, I think, around April or May of last year that you all put in your vote for who you wanted to be on that State Advisory Committee from our metro region. It's also made up of representatives from the other metro regions, the other abatement regions, which are made up of counties that don't have populations over 30,000. I don't have that information right in front of me of how that state advisory committee's made up, but.
Well, I know more than I did before I asked the question, so thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? And I guess just to follow up on that, we do essentially have a local representative on that committee. Brenda Neiman was nominated and selected to represent Metro Region, one of the Metro Region representatives, correct?
That's correct, yes.
So that will be a good connection for understanding how that committee works and what their priorities are. So
yes.
good.
And Mr. Chair, Commissioners, what I do recall from that state advisory makeup is it did have requirements for public health background and things like that. There was requirements for who could be nominated to that state advisory committee. And that was all laid out in the settlement documents.
Correct.
Which brings another question to my mind. So do you know, were there any, I recognize the state health or the health component and Drenda's expertise in that area, were there people from law enforcement like that serve on the drug enforcement task force that sort of works all over the state on this?
Sure, Chair Commissioner. There was a number of eligible backgrounds that people could have for that state advisory trust. I'd have to go back and look at
Okay.
what that was. I can't recall if there was one of those or not.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Mr. McCauley, if possible, maybe after the meeting, I don't know if there's a site that they have already that maybe you could forward us the link or something that shows those
Yeah.
committee makeup or something,
Yes,
if you would. Pretty
yes.
please.
Happy to
Thank-
do so.
Thank you very much. All right, other questions about the memorandum of understanding between Lewis and Clark County and the city of Helena?
If I might,
Please, Commissioner.
just to kind of get a handle on the dollars again here. The about $4 to $5 million that we would get over 18 years, that comes out to about $250,000 a year. You know, it's going to go up and down depending on the settlements a little bit, but you know, each year it could be a substantial amount to work towards helping folks with problems with addiction to opioids. So it's nothing to sneeze at. Are those roughly the right numbers?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Commissioner, I think it does average out to about that over the 18 years. Right now, there's only 3 settlements that we're receiving funding for. But they're 2 of the largest ones that we're receiving funding for right now, the distributors and the Janssen settlements. A number of them have also been settled, but we haven't received payments for those yet. But yeah, I think over the average, it was around 250,000.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions this time? Okay. How about public comment on this item? How about public comment on this memorandum of understanding? Okay, hearing no public comment. Commissioners, is there a motion, please?
Mr. Chair, I would move to accept the memorandum of understanding between Lewis and Clark County and the city of Helena as explained by Ms. McCauley.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the MOU as presented. Further discussion? Just thank you, Ann, for bringing it forward and being our eyes and ears on the ground and our expert, if you will. Thanks for taking on that role. Appreciate it. Commissioners, with that, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you very much. All right, next item on the agenda is a request for a conditional use permit for the LifePoint Baptist Church Zone 2023-022. Good morning. And as she's getting ready, there's just something that I'm sure that Rachel will talk about it, but something that has already gone before the Planning and Zoning Commission and with a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. I'll let you explain that a little bit as we go forward here, and then we'll talk about it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Good morning, Mr. Chair, Board of Commissioners. For the record, my name is Rachel Ward. I'm a planner with the Community Development and Planning Department. Before you is a request for a conditional use permit, Zone 2023-022, for the expansion of an existing church in Special Zoning District Number 43, East Helena Valley. The applicant is LifePoint Baptist Church, and the applicant's representative is Jeff Downhauer with Mosaic Architecture. I'm going to go through this presentation. As you mentioned, Mr. Chair, this is a presentation that you likely heard at the Planning and Zoning Commission, but want to give it again just in case there is additional conversation that is sparked. So this is a vicinity map in front of you. The subject property is located at 2526 Lake Helena Drive at the intersection of Remington Street and Lake Helena Drive. The property is 4.974 acres in size per the plat of RD Acres Number 1. And the property is surrounded on all sides by residential uses. That includes the Eastgate Village developments, both to the east and to the south, as well as the Eastgate Elementary School just to the southeast. So as I mentioned, this is a request for a conditional use permit for a 668 square foot addition to the south side of the auditorium of the existing LifePoint Baptist Church. The property's within Special Zoning District 43 and churches and other places of worship are listed as a conditional use, which is why this expansion is before you today. The purpose of the expansion is to accommodate the remodel of the auditorium, and that includes expanding out the worship platform, incorporating larger seats, relocating the sound booth. The application notes that in theory, there could be 20 additional seats that are incorporated within this larger auditorium. But they anticipate, because they're swapping out larger seats, moving the sound booth, the worship platform, these 20 seats likely won't all be incorporated. The staff report does review this project for the full capacity that could be incorporated. The church is currently served by an individual well and a wastewater treatment system. Because of the scope of the church activities aren't going to be expanded. They're still going to be the same hours of operation for the existing church services. There's no daycare or any school element to this. There's going to be no need to expand that wastewater treatment system, and the facilities are adequate. This is the first phase of a two-phase expansion. The applicant is aware that any future expansion will require a conditional use permit before that can commence. Staff received the CUP application on November 9th, 2023, and the applicant was deemed complete and sufficient on December 7th. As part of that review process, a summary of the application as well as the site plan was submitted to various public agencies, which are listed in the staff report. We received 4 comments back. One was from the Lewis and Clark Address Coordinator, the Floodplain Manager, Public Works Department, and the Sheriff's Office. None of these comments indicated any concern. We also followed the public notice requirements that are outlined in Special Zoning District 43. Specifically, a notice was mailed to adjacent property owners on December 13th. The notice was published in the Helena Independent Record on December 16th and the 23rd. And while not required in the zoning district, we did post a sign on the property, which you can see in front of you, on December 15th. To date, we've only received 1 comment, and that was from Dan Rispens, the superintendent of the East Helena Public Schools, indicating that they're in support of the project. So as you know, conditional use permits are granted based on review criteria that are outlined in the Special Zoning District 43. For this district, these criteria are going to be site suitability, appropriateness of design, availability of public services and facilities, and the immediate neighborhood impact. The review also includes an analysis of compliance with the Lewis and Clark growth policy. And I'm going to briefly go over these findings as presented in the staff report as they relate to the criteria. So the first criteria is site suitability. With regard to adequate usable space, the subject property is 4.974 acres in size, currently developed with a 4,906 square foot church building, a 16,000 square foot auxiliary church building, a shed, fenced playground, and a 49,000 square foot gravel parking lot. The addition would extend the building south, approximately 50 feet from the south property line, which is well over the 10-foot required minimum setback for principal structures. Existing and proposed development would cover approximately 26% of the lot, which is well under the 40% maximum lot coverage requirement in the zoning district. Access to the property exists via Lake Helena Drive, which is a paved 2-lane county collector road within a 63-foot road and utility easement. And the property has an existing gravel approach. With regard to environmental constraints, the property has no known wetlands, floodplain, high groundwater, surface water, or other critical wildlife habitat, but it is within the administrative boundaries of the regulations governing soil displacement and disposal in the East Helena Superfund area. With regard to appropriateness of design.
I'm going to
Absolutely.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you right there, just so we don't get too far down the road here, and just talk about, prior to going on to appropriate design, it's the site suitability piece. Just want to talk about it a little bit, make sure that we're discussing it. So adequate usable space, you went over that pretty well. I think the amount of property that's being developed versus the amount of property that's available clearly meets the standard. And the reason we have these criteria is to make sure that you know, we're meeting the guides of the zoning. And so in order to be eligible for a conditional use permit, these criteria have to be met. And the reason we go through this, and I think you know, it's likely that the applicant might be saying, boy, this is a small project. Why are we going through this whole process? But I think it's really important that we talk about the criteria and talk about how it meets the criteria, because if anyone wanted to challenge this, or there were any issues, we want to make sure that our decision is durable, and the questions that we ask and the facts that we're discussing are legit, if you will, and that we've considered them and we've looked at them. So in terms of site suitability, the adequate usable space, I think it's clear in the finding of fact there that has been presented, that there is clearly usable space. I think setback issues is another thing that has to be assessed, whether that's going to be an issue, and if this development is displacing parking or access or whatever it might be. So I think those have been pretty well addressed in this finding, and I find it myself adequate and sufficient. But commissioners, I wanted to give us an opportunity to talk about these if there's anything further around site suitability. Anything anybody wants to discuss on that issue? It's on page 6 of 16 of the staff report. And the next one, B, is adequate access. There's no change in access proposed, and access has been adequate from Lake Helena Drive. Not talking about significant impact to parking issues and those kinds of things with this as well. So commissioners, I don't think that adequate access warrants significant concern from my perspective, and I think that the finding covers that pretty well. Anything anybody wants to add about access? Talk about access. Yes, Commissioner.
I would just comment that this location has been in use as a church facility, including the parking lot. And many of these concerns were addressed years ago when this parcel was first designated for a church. So we're kind of replowing old ground, but we have to consider it again. And I appreciate the chairman's reminding us that we can't just kind of rubber stamp the former decision. We've got to think about the whole thing and do the best job we can. So thank you for providing us this opportunity. And Andy, thanks for your, I know after 18 years of experience, you have been down this road before, and that historic knowledge that you have helps us all. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And just another comment there. I mean, this is why we have these rules. So if this, for example, was a project that was significant and took up half the parking spaces, and there were not adequate spaces for whatever purpose they were going to be using the facility for, I mean, it would be an issue. We'd have to address that. We'd have to talk about how we're going to mitigate those kinds of things if the access was not adequate, those kinds of things. So it's good to talk about it and just make sure that we're affirming this. So thank you, Commissioner. Anything else on that regard? And then absence of adverse environmental constraints. There really is not a significant change to the environmental issues Go ahead. You.
No, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I would just note that this is one of the review criteria that does have an associated condition of approval. And so that condition of approval is there and is tied to this finding that the property is within this East Helena Superfund area administrative boundaries.
So, and essentially, if we look at the condition then related to that, it really is complying with those rules and regulations for soil disturbance in this zone, where it's a Superfund site and there is potential for lead and arsenic in the soil, and so they'll have to follow those rules, which is essentially what the condition says. Correct?
Correct, Mr. Chair, and I believe that is condition number 3.
Yeah, condition number 3: prior to development, soil disturbance applicant successors assigned shall obtain a permit from the lead education assistance program, soil disturbance in excess of a cubic yard. And it's there's standard requirements for soil disturbance in that area. And so it's good to point that out, that remains something that the applicant will have to make sure that they address. So good finding. And I agree with that. So, and then you have presented a conclusion after the site's sustainability portion of this, and maybe touch on that right now, and we'll just talk about that.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. Commissioners, so the conclusion that I have in the staff report states that impacts with regard to site suitability as it pertains to adequate usable space, adequate access, and absence of environmental constraints will be mitigated through proposed conditions of approval, and therefore the site will be suitable for the proposed use.
Right, and it's just what we've been talking about. So
Exactly.
the lead abatement process is one of those, or the soil stuff. So I think that conclusion sums it up well from my perspective. Anything you'd like to add, commissioners?
No,
All
I
right.
think the conclusion after all this study, the conclusion is fully indicates that we're headed in the right direction.
Thank you. All right. Appropriateness of design. Let's talk about that.
Okay, so moving on to appropriateness of design. The application and the site plan indicate that the lot is currently served by a 49,000 square foot gravel parking lot, which can accommodate 80 parking spaces. The site plan also shows that 4 of those are paved and ADA compliant adjacent to the entrance of the building. The zoning regulations require 1 parking space per 5 seats or 40 square feet of gross floor area used for assembly, which would mean that 72 spaces are required for the project. This is, again, the proposed parking is in excess of the required minimum zoning parking. The property is directly accessed from Lake Helena Drive, which is a 2-lane county road with a gravel approach, which is sufficient in width to accommodate two-way traffic. The gravel parking lot, while not striped, appears large enough to facilitate traffic circulation on the property. And as previously mentioned, the majority of the lot will remain undeveloped and consists of range grasses. The addition will expand the building, but the developed yard and playground area isn't anticipated to impact open space on the lot whatsoever. Continuing on with appropriateness of design, with regard to fencing, the subject property is fenced to the north and west. There's wire and chain link fencing along the south property line. No other fencing or screening is proposed with the church expansion. With regard to landscaping, the church has irrigated sod and landscaping around the building and within a decorative landscape island at the entrance to the parking lot. The southward expansion of the church will require some lawn and landscape rock and a concrete walkway to be relocated, but there's no additional landscaping that's proposed with this phase. A 5-year noxious weed management plan is not required given the minimal land disturbance of the project, but noxious weeds should be managed on site in accordance with state statute. With regard to signage, the subject property currently contains a stone monument sign located at the entrance of the parking lot, as well as 2 wooden posts that are used to secure banner flags advertising church events. No additional signs are proposed, and and the special zoning district 43 doesn't have any requirements or restrictions for on-site signs. Both signs have spotlights that are directed upward and towards the face of the signs. And the spotlight used to eliminate the temporary banners and the monument sign appear to be in compliance with the lighting standards. Moving on to lighting in general, lighting on the property consists of 3 pole lights and 4 wall lights. 2 of the existing pole lights are located in the gravel parking lot to the north of the building. And the third pole light is situated on the east side of the parking lot. All 3 pole lights are full cutoff security lighting, and the applicant will install a wall light by the exterior of the door of the proposed addition, which is also designed to be in compliance with the lighting requirements of the zoning regulations.
Thank you.
Yes.
Let's talk about appropriateness of design for a minute. And went over those criteria under that category. Commissioners, any questions, comments about those pieces? I'll start with the lighting. Talked about the lighting, and one of the issues around lighting is arranging the lighting in a certain way so it's shielded from the neighbors and passing vehicles and those kinds of things. It's appropriate for the property, but doesn't impede on the neighboring properties and roads. And I think that's important that we talk about, because as part of the conditions, I think that's in the conditions as well, that those things have to be met, right? Landscaping, noxious weed plan is not required, but they're still required to follow the law around noxious weeds. And I think that's really important. And people might say, why do we have these in there? Why are we so prescriptive? But when the zoning was created in the first place, these were the things that this is a citizen initiated zone. These are the things that they wanted to consider. And when there was a conditional use permit, these were the rules and regs that there was interest of making sure that this criteria was met. So anything else, commissioners, that you want to talk about? I don't think the parking's impacted significantly at all with this project. Traffic circulation doesn't change at all. Open space is significant, as we talked about in the last category. Fencing, screening, all of that is not impacted significantly. So those criteria have been met. You want to read the conclusion related to these, and we'll talk about that.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. The impacts related to the appropriateness of design regarding parking, traffic circulation, and lighting will be mitigated through the proposed conditions of approval. Therefore, the design as proposed will accommodate appropriate use of the lot.
So let's talk about the conditions related to these
Absolutely.
categories. Just relate it back.
For sure. So, Mr. Chair, condition number 4, the applicant, its successors, and assigns shall ensure that any ground disturbance associated with the activities authorized by this conditional use permit will be managed to prevent noxious weed establishment or spread. The applicant's, its successors, and assigns shall ensure noxious weeds do not propagate or go to seed on the subject property pursuant to MCA 7-22-2116.
And to simplify that, it's the same for all of us. We all have to follow the law around noxious weeds and mitigate our noxious weeds. But it's important to point that out when somebody's disturbing the ground, breaking the ground, and changing things that needs to be brought up to them again, even if there isn't a weed plan that's required. So, commissioners, other discussion around that? All right, let's move to availability of public services and facilities. Talk about this criteria.
So with regard to availability of public services and facilities, the primary church building is currently served by an existing individual septic system, which was issued by the Environmental Health Division in compliance with the DEQ COSA, the Certificate of Subdivision Approval, a rewrite, which stipulates that the system is designed for weekend church use, not to include weekday school or daycare use. This first phase expansion will not contribute more than 20 additional individuals, will not expand church operations, and is therefore not required to expand the existing wastewater treatment system.
Just going to interrupt you there. We heard from the applicant at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting that there is no intended expansion of use. That public comment was there from the applicant, and that it's just a enhancement of the facility so that they can provide the services already providing more adequate. Correct?
Mr. Chair, that's correct. Yes.
Okay, just wanted to point that out. Go ahead.
Moving on to water, the church uses an existing well, which is drilled to a depth of approximately 204 feet. Groundwater monitoring data from the Lewis and Clark County Water Quality Protection District indicates water levels ranging in depth in that area from 37 to about 200 feet. That groundwater monitoring well is located about 300 feet from the subject property. No modifications are proposed to the water facilities with this expansion or required. And then lastly, with regard to stormwater, the existing COSA did not include a review of stormwater given the age of the lot and when it was created. However, the expansion is minimal in scope, and the structure will remain 50 feet from the closest property line and will be buffered with lawn. Moving on to fire protection, the property is located within the Eastgate Rural Fire District with station number 1 located approximately 0.5 miles away. Email correspondence from the fire chief indicates that the district has capacity to serve the church and the expansion, and the application materials indicate that the fire alarm system will be upgraded with the proposal. The property is currently and will continue to be served by the Lewis and Clark County Sheriff's Office. And lastly, with regard to streets, access to the property exists via Lake Helena Drive, which is a 2-lane paved county collector road. The property has an existing gravel approach, which is approximately 32 feet wide. And the Lewis and Clark County Public Works Department provided comment that they have no concerns with the church expansion as it pertains to roads or traffic.
Well, I'll stop you right there for a second and just see if there's any questions, comments, or any facts that commissioners would like to discuss and or add to or talk about in any way. Anything you'd like to add or talk about?
I think the sewer concerns have been addressed, the water concerns have been addressed, storm drainage has been addressed, fire protection, all of these things are being pretty well, all the available public services are in existence. There are going to be no real changes.
Well, that's, Commissioner, I go back to that essential fact that not much is significantly changing, adding 688 square feet or whatever it is. So it really isn't going to have significant impact from the facts that you've provided us here and from my review of them. No significant impact on the use of the sewer system, the water system, stormwater drainage doesn't change significantly. Fire protection, police protection, they're all essentially the same. And we've heard from Sheriff's Office, email from the fire chief that they feel like they have adequate ability to support this project. Streets, we've already talked about Lake Helena Drive and its adequacy. There isn't a significant new traffic there. So I think that I feel comfortable about the facts that are presented. I don't have any changes or additions to these facts. And I think the criteria in this under availability of public services has been satisfactorily discussed in this document and then reviewed in terms of the impact. So anything else, Commissioner, that you want to bring up? How about the conclusion related to these?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. The conclusion for this criteria, the impacts of the availability of public services and facilities regarding water, wastewater, fire protection, and streets will be mitigated through the proposed conditions of approval. Therefore, the project as proposed will provide adequate services and facilities to serve the needs of the proposed use.
And any specific conditions related to the availability of public services and facilities?
With regard to conditions of approval, number 1, the occupancy and use of the property shall be in compliance with the site plan and other documents submitted with the application for review, except as may be modified by these conditions. That's condition number 1, and just ensures that the operation as proposed by the applicant will remain within that scope. and therefore the services that are provided will be adequate. That's the condition of approval. There are no other specific conditions with regard to water, wastewater, stormwater, fire protection, or roads, just simply that condition.
Thank you.
Because as you mentioned, this is minor in scope, and therefore no additional conditions are needed.
Right. Thank you. How about any questions, comments related to that, commissioners? All right, how about immediate neighborhood impact criteria?
So the next criteria relates to immediate neighborhood impacts. With regard to traffic generation, the proposed church expansion will allow for up to 20 additional seats in the church auditorium. Although this may not be the actual number of church goers added, the majority of the traffic to the church occurs on the weekends and therefore does not overlap with traditional weekday peak hour traffic. With regard to noise and vibration, there's no new anticipated impacts from that. There are no change in dust, glare, heat, or smoke, fumes, gas, or odors that are expected from the expansion. And finally, hours of operation will not change with the expansion. The church currently operates 2 services, one at 9 a.m. and one at 10:30. Some special events occur in the evenings, and the church offices are open Tuesday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4. These hours of operation appear reasonable for the residential neighborhood.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, considerations, questions, comments about the immediate neighborhood impacts, traffic generation, noise, vibration, dust, glare, heat, smoke, fumes, gas, odors?
I think it's pretty well established that there's not going to be much change in activity there that would make it, or that would make any real difference.
I have a comment about this is a minimal change, but we need to all be reminded of the camel getting the nose under the edge of the tent. Okay, so we're going to have 8 extra cars this time and just 20 seats. And then the next time, and these things have creeping impacts. And by addressing them as they come in, I think we can keep an eye on the long-term impact of growth in our community and the growth of not only this project, but the other projects that come in. And if we don't jump through all the hoops on this project, then we get another big project in that is less appealing, and the rules are the rules. So we have to apply them evenly. So that's why this one is important, because it's little and pretty and we all like it. But the next one that comes in may be big and ugly, but it'll have the same rules applied to it as we are applying to this one. So I'm glad we're doing this carefully.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. I think that was well established at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting as well, that this applicant may have future expansions or proposed future expansions, and they recognized on the record that they would have to go through this process again, probably for any future expansions, and consider the impacts. And this is a significant category in that immediate neighborhood impacts, because this is where we generally hear the most from people, is if these things are impacted to traffic, vibration, noise, all that, smoke, glare, whatever, then we hear from people. And so considering these is important, making sure that it's been thought through and talked about. And I would agree with Commissioner Payne in that, and Commissioner Rolfe in that via the findings that you've brought to us today, and consideration of any further findings, that the project proposed has minimal impact on these issues, and should be relatively even keel for what's happening there now. So did I ask you to talk about the conclusion related to these yet? No.
Mr. Chair, not yet,
Go
but
ahead.
I'd be happy to read the conclusion, which
Please.
goes along with the discussion. The conclusion for this is the proposed use will not be detrimental to surrounding neighborhoods in general. Therefore, any immediate neighborhood impacts should be minimal.
Okay. And there's really not a condition related to these because the impacts are so minimal.
That is correct.
That's really good to point out. I mean, it is in itself minimal if we don't even have conditions of approval to try and mitigate issues that are coming up. So that's important to talk about. All right, commissioners, anything further related to those criteria that we've just discussed in conclusion? Okay. Talk about the growth policy and how it fits there.
Absolutely. So finally, the proposed project lies within the transitional growth area of the Lewis and Clark County Growth Policy, which was updated in 2016. The transitional growth area was established through consideration of lands by their proximity to cities of East Helena and Helena, and the possibility of extending city services to accommodate future development at higher densities. The three primary constraints within this area that were outlined in the growth policy update include the road network, capacity of rural fire districts, and wastewater treatment in area of shallow groundwater. This proposal adheres to the intent of the growth policy because access to the property exists via Lake Helena Drive, which is a paved county collector road. The proposal is within reasonable proximity to a local fire station with adequate resources to address a fire emergency. And high groundwater is not present on site based on area groundwater monitoring and well log data.
Thank you. So in essence, the proposal, it complies with the growth policy.
Mr. Chair, that's correct. And that is the conclusion found in the staff report, that the
Yes.
proposal is consistent with the growth policy.
Great. Thank you. Commissioners, any questions related to that? Okay. Go ahead and move on. Oh, you're
And just to summarize, just a last slide, as you know, the Planning and Zoning Commission did hold a public hearing on January 10th, 2024. There were 6 draft conditions of approval. I was going to go over them at this point, but I believe that we've gone over a number of them, though I'm happy to read them if you'd like.
I think we've talked about most of them, but maybe conditions 5 and 6. Talk about those quickly. I think we've talked about all of the other ones. 1, 2. Well, 2 we haven't talked about specifically, but I think we did in terms of soil disturbance. Go ahead. I'll just let you lead us through that and then we'll talk about them.
Sounds good. I believe condition number 1 we did address. That was about compliance with the site plan and other documents. Condition number 2, prior to any development and or soil disturbance, the applicant, its successors and assigns shall obtain a building permit, electrical permit, and plumbing permit as applicable from the state of Montana. That was addressed in the staff report under the criteria for site suitability, specifically adequate usable space. Condition number 3, I believe we addressed, that's the East Helena Superfund area and the lead education assistance program. Condition number 4 regarding noxious weeds and management of those, we have addressed. Condition number 5, the conditional use permit shall terminate 12 months from the date of Board of County Commissioners approval if commencement of authorized activity has not begun, unless the applicant, its successors and assigns can demonstrate and maintain a continuous effort in good faith, including preparing financing, securing state or federal permits, undertaking engineering and design, et cetera, in commencing the activity. Mr. Chair, this is language that comes directly from the zoning regulations for Special Zoning District 43.
Okay.
And then lastly, condition number 6, should the applicant, its successors and assigns be unable to comply with any condition of approval, this permit shall be considered null and void. And again, that is language that comes from this Special Zoning District 43 regulations.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions, concerns, comments about the proposed conditions of approval at this time? So a couple more questions. Just bring it back to the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval. It was a unanimous vote.
This is correct. Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And same criteria. There was no changes by that group of the findings of fact or additions or conditions of approval, those kinds of things. Okay,
That is correct.
great. Any further questions for staff at this time? You'll have another opportunity, but
Just one thing, I think maybe for the general public, it would be nice to clarify when the new zoning was put into place a couple of years ago, that it was to be simplified, but because this is not included in that new zoning area, but is a zoning area created by the landholders within the area or citizen initiated zoning, we still have to go through these extra processes. And I think that should this property ever be incorporated in the city of East Helena, for instance, it would go through their zoning process. If the citizen initiated zoning were to be terminated, it would fall then under the general zoning area of our county, in the Helena Valley, and it would be a simpler process because it would go to the Board of Adjustments and be checked and be approved or disapproved there and not have to come back to the county commission.
you're right, it'd be simpler because we wouldn't be involved.
That's right. That's right.
That's for sure. But anyway, thank you, Commissioner. So with that, I might ask Mr. Downhour to come up representing the applicant. Maybe we're looking at this as a whole new set of public maybe watching. So we're kind of just I'll ask you a couple of questions. You have the staff report. You and the applicant are okay with the staff report and the conditions of approval, the findings, those kinds.
Yeah,
of
I guess
things. You've
mostly
had.
I'm Jeff Downhour with
Yes.
Mosaic Architecture. Yeah, we have reviewed the staff report and the conditions and they all seem perfectly acceptable. I think the review was quite thorough and accurate to what we're doing. So I'm here if you have any other questions or clarifications. I know parts of it are a little confusing. There was a lot of information there, so I'll just be here for as long as you need me to be.
Any questions for Mr.? Any questions? Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you
you.
being here. Appreciate you enduring our process. It's one of those things we have to do. So
Interesting. Yes, thank you.
thank you. Mr. McNally, anything we're missing you want to add? Mr. Ash, anything? I'll let go Mr. McNally first.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, just one thing I'd like to add in the discussion you had during Mrs. Ward's presentation. There was a mention about whether or not the use had already been reviewed. The use hasn't been reviewed prior. This was an existing use when our citizen initiated zoning for special district number 43 was
Right.
adopted in 2008. And so now what we're looking at is an expansion of this use
Right.
that requires us to go through a conditional use permit for review, and that's what you're doing today. So just wanted to clarify that for you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, Commissioners, any further questions? Mr. Hash, anything you'd like to add or recommend before we move on?
No, Mr. Chair, just reminding the commission at some point to be taking public comment throughout this process.
Yes, absolutely. Get to that next. Just want to make sure we're through this part of the debate. Okay. So Mr. Downhour's already spoken, but if there's any further public comment related to this item, any public comment? It is a public hearing actually, right? So I didn't mention that at the outset. This is a public hearing, which is, technically, I guess, a little different than just a public meeting, but so we have been going through the process of evaluating the proposal, and now any public testimony related to this. And I'll point out, there is no public coming forward, no public here today, other than Mr. Downhour, who represents the applicant. We heard from 3 or 4 agency types, and none of them had any issues. The sheriff's office, fire, folks didn't have any issues with that. The only public comment that we had in writing was from the superintendent of schools of East Helena, and it was in support of the project. That saw no issues with it from their perspective. And there is a school almost across the street. It's just kind of down the street a little bit. So that was good to hear from them that they're supportive of the project. So with that, we'll close, unless commissioners, anything else, we'll close public testimony at this time, and we'll move to our decision process. And commissioners, I believe we've gone through and discussed the findings. I don't know if you have, give you one more opportunity, any findings that you have, you find concern or want to change or want to add to, any conclusions that you want to discuss further, and then the conditions of approval, anything that you'd like to discuss further. If not, there is a proposed motion on the board if you'd like to use that. And I think we're at that point where we could, oh, please.
I can make, Mr. Chair, make one correction. It says motion to recommend approval. These were slides from the Planning and Zoning Commission. You were making the final decision, so
Take
there's
the
no
recommended
recommendation at
out
this
of there.
point.
Yeah, this is a motion to approve. So commissioners, would you like to lead us into a motion? Someone, please.
I would move that we approve the expansion of the LifePoint Baptist Church CUP application zone 2023-022 as recommended by the staff.
Second, Mr. Chair.
It's been moved and seconded, and Commissioner, I'm assuming that includes all the findings and conclusions.
All the
and
findings
conditions
and
of approval
conclusions. Yes,
that have been
findings and
presented.
conclusions and conditions of approval.
Okay,
Should have
great.
read the whole
I
thing.
would
been mo-
accept that as part of the second.
Moved and seconded. Okay, any further discussion then? I'll just say, yeah, thank you for the motion. It is important. I appreciate the work done on this because it seems like on one hand that it's over the top for a small project like this, but we must make sure we follow our own rules, and the rules have been established via the citizen initiated zoning. And these are the ones that have been established for adopting or considering a conditional use permit. So small or large, we have to go through the process. So I appreciate folks doing that, and all of it's important. If you live next door, it may be more important to you than us watching from afar. So going through this is important, giving people opportunity in the community an opportunity to participate in this process. So commissioners, anything further that you'd like to talk about?
No.
All right, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Rachel. Thank you, Mr. Downhour, for being here. Bet. All right, we are at the point in our meeting where we will take public comment on any item that is under the jurisdiction of the commission, but not on today's agenda. Is there any public comment? Any public comment? Seeing no public come forward, commissioners, we will stand adjourned. Thank you.
Bring my glasses today. And so it's harder for me to read things.